Okay, I give the floor to the candidate.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to present my study about tobacco control policies and youth smoking in Indonesia. Today's presentations, these are the outlines. The first one is the background, and then the methodology, what are the results, and what can we conclude and recommend from the findings of this thesis. Tobacco smoking is an important public health issue in Indonesia. Indonesia has been known for the highest smoking prevalence at global level, where 7 out of 10 Indonesian men are smokers. And also, the tobacco industry in Indonesia gained more strong political power because the tax from tobacco industry is really high, and it shares the biggest proportion at the state revenue. And Indonesia also has been known for a video of toddlers who could smoke, 2 packs of cigarettes each day, and the tobacco industry often creates attractive marketing to target youth. And Indonesia also has not ratified the WHO FCTC, and we already know that smoking generates, great loss due to the unproductivity, mortality, and morbidity because of diseases related to smoking habit. Although there are so many challenges for tobacco control to grow, there are also more opportunities in Indonesia. Indonesia has introduced the decentralization, where it gives great discretion for local stakeholders to develop local policy, including the local tobacco control policies. And also Indonesia has progress of local and national tobacco control until now, and there are a series of tobacco control policy at national and at province level. So these are the opportunities that tobacco control program can consider for strategies. Our thesis aimed to identify potential smoking prevention strategies targeting Indonesian adolescents. So what kind of strategies? So we identify risk factors and modifiable factors that are related to smoking. Those factors included socio-demographic factors, social factors, and environmental factors. So what kind of strategies that we need to develop? So we need to know what is the pattern of local smoke-free policy adoption, and also we need to know how is the impacts of those policies on smoking prevalence among adults and among adolescents. We also want to know the tobacco advertising exposure among adolescents. We want to know factors that are related to smoking among adolescents, including the social structure factors and also parental factors. To identify that, we use 3 different data sources in Indonesia. First, we compile all smoke-free policy documents from districts and from all provinces in Indonesia. We read and we reviewed all the documents, and we quantified the policies. The policy according to the tobacco control scale, which has been widely used in the European region to see the strength level. We also use the national data set from Ministry of Health, named Riskesdas in 2007-2013, to identify impacts of smoke-free policy on smoking in Indonesia. And we divided the samples into 2 different groups, adult and youth. We also conducted a school-based survey in 7 cities in Indonesia among students, grades 7 to 12. And most analysis had been done in R and Stata through multi-level logistic regression. So what did we find? We found that local smoke-free policy adoption followed the horizontal diffusion pattern and also was more likely to occur if adjacent districts had adopted smoke-free policy earlier. And this created a geographical clusters in smoke-free policy adoption, not only clusters, but also disparity in adoption. The adoption was more condensed in western part of Indonesia than in eastern part, and also the adoption was later among poorer districts, among districts with higher tobacco production and in rural area. So this is clear, the disparity that we found in our thesis, in our study. How's the impacts? Impacts of local smoke-free policy were inconsistent and insufficient on adults and adolescent smoking prevalence. For example, province-level smoke-free policies were associated with lower odds of smoking continuation. But those policies also were significantly correlated with higher odds of current smoking. This inconsistency we often see in the results. And about smoking by individual and district characteristics, we see that smoking was more prevalent among Indonesian men and boys, as the cultural norms in Indonesia capture smoking as masculine behavior. And also smoking was more prevalent in less educated group of adult males. We also see smoking prevalence among adults and among adolescents was higher in district with tobacco production. It is clear that tobacco industry has influence in the area. We use the school-based survey data to identify social patterning in adolescent smoking. By this study, we still see smoking rates were higher among boys, and also we found the significant correlation between parental education and smoking among boys, and this association was also mediated by father smoking status, whether parents pick up their son after school. It is parental control, and also disapproval of parents toward their child smoking behavior. This is the parental permissiveness toward smoking behavior. Among girls, we observe only girls were more likely to smoke if parents were wealthier. And by religion, we did not see any significant correlations between religions and smoking. Our study about tobacco advertising exposure found that the TAP's exposure was high on online and offline media platforms. For example, on TV, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and online news. But it was quite small on Twitter and on radio. And also, the TAP's exposure was high across cities with and without TAP's ban policy. Adolescents also often reported that they saw outdoor tobacco advertising on the street, billboard, and in mini markets. And also they often saw tobacco advertising in live music and sport events. So we found that cities with TAP's ban did not necessarily have lower TAP's exposure rates. And we also assume that national TAP's ban policy seemed ineffective to prevent TAP's exposure among adolescents. So what can we conclude from our findings from this thesis? We found that the horizontal division in SVP adoption is more relevant for smoke-free policy, is more relevant for Indonesia. So we recommend a strategy that tobacco control expert on parties need to approach local level stakeholders, especially those from rural area districts with higher tobacco production and in western part of Indonesia. We also see inconsistent impacts of smoke-free policy on smoking prevalence using the national data. So the strategy, like the stakeholders need to strengthen the enforcement and the actual implementation of smoke-free policy in the real life, in the reality. We also see there are some significant parental factors in smoking uptake among adolescents. So the strategy is Indonesia need to target boys with lower educated parents, especially, and to ask the parents to increase their parental control and to reduce their permissiveness towards smoking habit. About the exposure, we see high TAP's exposure among adolescents on all media platforms, offline and online. So the strategy that Indonesia need to strengthen, and also I think it is important to reform the existing national and local TAP's ban policy, because mostly those are partial policy, still allow commercial in certain time on in certain form of media, and Indonesia needs to regulate TAP's ban for online platform, because the TAP's exposure is still high on online platforms. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you, and terima kasih for your time to see my presentation.
We will start the defense at 10:15.
Thank you.
Please switch on your camera. I give the floor to the rector.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the special meeting of the doctoral board of the University of Amsterdam on the occasion of the PhD defense of Mr. Septiono. Dear candidate, to open the discussion, please read aloud the first part of the formula.
Yeah, thank you. By authority of the Rector Magnificus and the doctoral board of this university, I shall, during this hour, in order to obtain the doctorate, publicly defend my thesis entitled Tobacco Control Policies and Youth Smoking in Indonesia. I entreat all those who wish to voice criticism of the contents of the thesis to do so in a truthful and lucid manner, so as to provide an opportunity for an ordered exchange of views.
Thank you. Are you ready to start with the defense?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Then we will start with the whole ceremony and I hereby introduce the first opponent. And the first opponent is Professor van den Putten. Professor van den Putten is a professor in health or communication at the University of Amsterdam. Professor van den Putten, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear candidate, by virtue of my right and with permission of the Rector Magnificus, I would like to discuss with you the contents of your thesis. Candidate, you may not remember it, but you sent me an email on 27th of April 2015, a long time ago, and you offered yourself to me as a PhD student. And what was even better, you said it was completely free for me. You brought your own finances. So I get many of these letters, and normally I send an email back, sorry, I don't have time. And this time I thought it was quite interesting, but I was very busy. So I sent you an email. When I have more time to read your attachments, I will come back to you. I never did. Boy, am I sorry. Because now I've read your thesis, and I think it's an extremely interesting thesis. It's very well written. I applaud you for your reflections and discussions on your results. So yes, I feel a bit embarrassed that I have to say this, that I missed the opportunity and that Professor Gonst was better at this than me. And you raised my interest in Indonesia, but I also found out that my knowledge of Indonesia is inversely related to that. And that might bring me to my first question. In box 2 on page 203, you present many policy implications at the district, the provincial, and the national level. And my first question will be, at what level will anti-tobacco policies have more effect on smoking prevalence? And just to say why I came to these questions, there was different thoughts and different parts of your thesis that raised my interest in this. First, you observe that the political structures of countries are relevant for how important local policies are. And for example, in European countries, the vertical policy diffusion processes are stronger because national government is more dominant. And you also observe that the success of the policies in Western countries is larger than in Indonesia. So that might say you have to work at the national level. But on the other hand, you also observe that in Indonesia, districts are very autonomous and they can do what they like. So that would say, well, you have to work on the district level. But you also found that maybe you found that there is more horizontal adoption of policies in Indonesia. That would say district level still very good, but you also observe that in places when there's a stronger provincial policy, the districts do less, and it might be because they implement the policies on the province level, and you don't know that because you didn't study the implementation. So it might also be that the province level works better. So my question is, if you have to choose between working at the district, province, or national level, what would be your priority?
Dear the highly esteemed opponent, thank you for asking this and for remembering that I sent you an email in 2015. Now we can meet actually now, so it is, I'm so delighted to meet you here, Professor. And regarding your questions, whether we need, I prefer provincial or district stakeholders to implement smoke-free policies for more, promising result. In my opinion, I think it is easier to approach district level stakeholders to adopt smoke-free policy, as one of the reasons is the higher level of the government, there is also strong political influence from tobacco industry. So tobacco industry will gain more, strong lobby to advocate, to cancel, to postpone the policy, and it happens a lot in Indonesia. And if I need to choose, I will prefer to, I would prefer district smoke-free policy as one of tobacco control strategy. And also in the decentralization, I think it is one of the advantages of decentralization is local stakeholders. They can adopt more innovative policy. So if the policy is regulated at provincial level, for example, or at national level, I'm afraid that the policy will be uniform, will be in the same, standard. So, for instance, if the policy at provincial or national level, so districts below the authority of that province, they need to implement smoke-free policy, for example, which allows smoking room at the public places. So it is, I think, one of the disadvantages when when the policy is adopted at higher level stakeholders. So I think it is more promising if district level stakeholders, if I choose district level stakeholders to implement smoke-free policy. Yeah, we did not measure, or we did not assess the implementation. It is one of the limitations in this study. But although our review only based on paper only, not the real implementation, I think it also says a lot, because there are so much variation of smoke-free policy at the local setting. So yeah, I think that I prefer.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that's clear. So you choose the district level.
Yeah.
Then when I look at your recommendation, so I just pick one. So you say, for example, at the district level, you would like to strengthen the existing network of district stakeholders to accelerate SF3 diffusion and adoption. And well, I think that's a good strategy. Then I also wonder, so once you have these stakeholders, what arguments could they use to convince the local policymakers? Because you also need arguments to convince them to change their strategy. So what arguments could these stakeholders use, you think?
The argument that I need to convince them to adopt smoke-free policy is, once again, is smoking is really important public health issue, and if smoking is still high in the area, so the burden of smoking not only in the health sector but also in the economic sector in that area will be affected by higher smoking. So we need to convince them how disastrous smoking for that area. I also know local stakeholders already have many resources, and smoke-free policy, the existing smoke-free policy needs to be improved. But sometimes they need guidance, and we need to remind the stakeholder to seriously implement this. Maybe sometimes they just they forget to strongly enforce the policy, and also we need the society and experts in local in that area to help the authority in the monitoring and the implementation. So yeah, I think that is my answer.
Okay, thank you. Dear candidate,
Yeah.
thank you for your interesting answers, and I give the floor back to the chairperson.
Thank you, Professor van den Putten. Then the opposition will be continued by Professor Nagelhout. Professor Nagelhout is a professor in health and welfare of people with a lower socio-economic position. And Professor Nagelhout is working at Maastricht University. Professor Nagelhout, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear candidates, by virtue of my right and with permission of the Rector Magnificus, I would like to discuss with you the contents of your thesis. But first, I want to compliment you with an excellent PhD thesis about a very important topic. What I like in particular about your thesis is that you haven't limited yourself to examining the impact of policies, but that you've also looked at adoption, implementation, and compliance, and that you have also described subgroup differences, international developments, and that you've also described the influence of the tobacco industry. So compliments with a very complete thesis. I would first like to talk with you about socioeconomic differences in smoking. In chapter 3 on page 85, your last sentence is that the difference in smoking prevalence between educational groups in Indonesia may be largely attributed to the high level of illiteracy among poorly educated individuals, resulting in a lack of knowledge on health risk and poor understanding of warning messages and campaigns. My first question is whether you agree with me that socioeconomic differences in smoking are about much more than literacy and knowledge. And my second question is whether you can explain a bit more about what happens in the lives of people with a low socioeconomic position that makes them more vulnerable to starting smoking and makes it more difficult for them to quit smoking. So going a bit beyond literacy and knowledge.
I'm really sorry. Can you repeat the second question? Because I missed some words. Yeah,
okay. Can you explain a bit more about what happens in the lives of people with a low socioeconomic position and that makes them more vulnerable to start smoking and also makes it more difficult for them to quit smoking?
Okay. Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Regarding whether I agree the education factors is not about literacy only, I think I will agree with your comments. First, usually people with lower educational status, it also impacts to their economic status. So mostly people with lower educational level, they also have lower profit, and also many studies also suggest that lower socioeconomic status were correlated with smoking among adults. And I think in our study also found that further smoking status has impact on adolescent smoking among boys. So if we only see educational levels as literacy, I think, I agree. It is beyond that. We also need to see the economic status, because education and socioeconomic status, they are two different things, but they are also related, right? Yeah. I think that I can say that I agree with that. Educational status is beyond not only literacy, and also, it is to target people with lower educational level in smoking prevention program. First, like we need, I think the tobacco control program, for example, need to be more specific in the prevention. Maybe because the literacy is quite low, so why tobacco control need to do? Why don't tobacco control like making a video or making poster that do not need to, that people do not need to read about it, because maybe some people
But
do
then
not
you go
understand.
back to the literacy again.
Yeah.
But can you explain a bit about how people live? And I can imagine that people may be poor and maybe they have a lot of stress. Do you think
Yeah.
that this relates to smoking as well, and not only the knowledge part?
Yeah. Maybe I will explain it with the environmental factors. Usually poor people, they also live with poor neighbors. So it also, yeah, it beyond, it is beyond literacy, and also living in the same groups, in the same environment. People will, be more vulnerable to do the same habit like what people do. So they can see other people as role model. Also, maybe this is normal behavior among poorer environment, that smoking is normal there. So yeah, it is beyond that. So in the same, living in the same environment, and for one environment, and what is one other things, environment and
Sorry, I think we need to go on to the next question, perhaps,
okay.
Because I think I have a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I would also like to talk with you about the results of chapter 3, because this was the discussion and the interpretation and implications of those results.
Okay.
You found quite unexpected increase in smoking among individuals exposed to the adoption of smoke-free policies. And a possible explanation that you also mentioned is that the causality may be reversed, and that smoke-free policies are adopted in places with high smoking prevalence. You also say that compliance may have reduced short-term effectiveness. And the implication of that is that we need to implement stronger smoke-free policies and focus more on enforcement. But I have a slightly alternative explanation. Could it be that adopting smoke-free policies in places with high smoking levels may have reduced compliance? Thus, a high percentage of smokers was the reason to adopt a smoke-free policy, but this higher smoking prevalence makes it more difficult to enforce the policy. Do you think that this could be the case, and what would be the implication of this explanation?
Okay, yeah, thank you for your concern regarding this, the reverse effect of smoke-free policy on smoking prevalence. Yeah, we actually did not see that. How was the association, the reverse association between those factors? Yeah, we need to deeply explore again about that, but yeah, okay. But I don't think the stakeholders, they adopt smoke-free policy according to the smoking prevalence, because in Indonesia it is more horizontal division pattern. So they see what neighbors do, and then they adopt it, but they do not see how is the prevalence in those area, and then they adopt smoke-free policy. Because for example, province in Gorontalo, I remember Gorontalo has the highest prevalence in smoking in Indonesia, but until now they did not adopt smoke-free policy. So I can say the reverse effect may not be applicable.
Okay.
Because of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Nagelhout, for your questions. And the opposition will be continued by Dr. De Boer. Dr. De Boer is an expert in epidemiology at the University of Groningen. Dr. De Boer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rector. Dear candidates, by virtue of my right and with permission of the Rector Magnificus, I would like to also discuss with you the contents of your thesis. But as the former opponents did, I would also like to first congratulate you on your beautiful piece of work, which is very diverse, has multiple studies, multiple study designs. And I also learned a lot about Indonesia and smoking policies in Indonesia. So I read it with great joy. Okay, having said that, I'll continue the defense now. And I have some questions about chapter 6. So in chapter 6, you describe the mediating role of parental factors in the social patterning of smoking among adolescents in urban Indonesia. And in the introduction, you state that these parental factors, so that's parental smoking behavior, permissiveness, and parental control, may explain part of the social patterning of smoking among adolescents. So when I read that, being an epidemiologist, I thought this chapter is going towards exploring explanatory factors for the relation between the social patterning and smoking among adolescents. But then in the aims, I read that you were actually aiming to study the mediating effects of these parental factors on the association between family factors and adolescent smoking. So then I was a little bit confused, because in my opinion, explanatory factors are different from mediating factors. So maybe first you could explain to me if you agree with me and what the difference between those two things is.
Yeah. Yeah, dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for asking this. But actually, I never did explanatory analysis, so the mediating analysis, it is like the one factor, and then is it related to the outcomes, and maybe there is a mediating effect, mediating factors that increase or decrease the possibility of effect. But in the explanatory analysis, I think it is like some other factors may be caused by other factors. I don't know the exact question for this, but yeah, when we did this mediation, we saw the variables or the factors, like there is a causal, the causality that in those variables. It is like it is, many studies have clear findings that, for example, parental control associated with bad behavior among adolescents, including drinking and smoking, and many studies have said that. And also many studies often prove sociodemographic factors, certain sociodemographic factors also related to smoking behavior among adolescents. So when we did mediation analysis, we see the direct causality between those variables and smoking. So we, So we,
okay, thanks. So mediation is about causality, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these socioeconomic factors causally influence parental factors, and those might in their turn influence smoking behavior among adolescents, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and if we're talking about explanation, that would be more like that these parental factors are given explanation for the relation between socioeconomic factors and adolescent smoking. So they're actually, you could say they're variables that are that explain that relation, that are related to these socio-demographic factors. Eh? So if you look at your work, actually, in your analysis, you did look at both. Yeah, so in table 1, for instance, if you look at table 1, where you, I'm just gonna get it myself, where you looked at the, or you did the multi-level regression models for boys, examining the relation between family characteristics and parental factors on the one hand, and smoking prevalence on the other hand.
Yeah.
So these family characteristics, you could say, might be explained by what you call the potential mediators, so the parental factors. And if that is the case, then you would expect that that the relationship between family characteristics and smoking would partly disappear after adding these parental factors to the models you do. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but what I actually see is that if we look at parental education, which is actually which appears to be the strongest determinant or factor related to smoking behavior, you see that in model 1, the odds ratio for low versus high education is 1.57, whereas in model 2, after adding these potentially explaining factors, it increases instead of decreases. So do you have an explanation for that?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for your comments on the analysis. Yeah. Okay. The mediating. So this increase because like we can see from the significant, for example, parental control, maybe. Yeah, parental control. Okay, parents who has lower parental control, it seems that they, yeah, parental was parental control was lower, so it seems like the probability of adolescents smoking among adolescents who can smoke increase in the lower, especially in the lower group of parental education. So I think that yeah, I think that the explanation of or okay, I get it now. So it is like parents.
Can you give a short answer,
okay.
please?
So okay, maybe the explanation like this: parents who's lower educated, they also has lower parental control, so it increased the probability of adolescents to smoke. I think that's the answer.
Okay, I'm not sure if I totally agree, but I thank you for your answer, and I give the word back to the rector.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. de Boer. Then the opposition will be continued by Dr. ten Asbroek. Dr. ten Asbroek is an expert in global health at the University of Amsterdam. Dr. ten Asbroek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rector. Good afternoon, dear candidate. By virtue of my right and with permission of the Rector Magnificus, I would like to discuss with you the contents of your thesis. But before I phrase my questions, I would like to congratulate you with the work in your thesis. I've read it with joy, and I found it very accessible, well-written, and rich in analysis. And I also read about the author, so the final pages in your thesis, and I was pleased to see that you went to Copenhagen to study to do a master's in international health. So I was really looking forward to reading the thesis, and because I always start with about the author, so who is this person who wrote all this work, and I was going through your thesis, and I was pleased to see in the first introduction chapter very nicely a historical perspective on tobacco use and tobacco importance in Indonesia. But throughout the rest of the thesis, I saw that your very comprehensive work was really focused within the context of Indonesia. which makes it also very valuable and useful in that particular context, your context, which is also an important aspect, I believe. But I would like to ask you, how does your work fit in the international perspective? And yeah, so that's my very brief starter. So maybe you have already a response to this.
Okay. Dear the highest team opponent, thank you for your question and how my work fits with international perspective. Indonesia is one of the biggest tobacco producer at the global level, and also it is the biggest producer in the Southeast Asia region, and also the highest smoking prevalence is the highest at global level, and also the burden of diseases related to smoking will be higher in the future, and it will cost a lot to the health sector, to the health insurance, and yeah, many things in health sector, and also in the economy due to the loss, the unproductivity, and mortality and morbidity. This is the international perspective of that, because Indonesia has a great role in the tobacco industry, and also smoking is the one of the highest in the region. So, and also many global attention and global eyes usually to Indonesia because of this, biggest tobacco producer, and also the highest smoking prevalence in Indonesia, and they often want to improve that in Indonesia. I think that is the international perspective of smoking issue in Indonesia because of the prevalence and the tobacco industry.
Thank you for this opening, because I think half of what you said is related to Indonesia itself, and the other half maybe to international kind of factors and context. So are there any countries or regions that maybe could have served as an example in understanding impact of tobacco policies, or the way tobacco policies influence tobacco use?
The example like for Indonesia to look up, or
possibly that could be a way to take this a step further.
I can see maybe many countries in Asia, or maybe specifically in Southeast Asia region, will be a good example for Indonesia. For example, Thailand, maybe we have so much common in culture, and also in the the type of the country, what do you say, the level income of the country, and many things we have the similar. And also, but Thailand has really good tobacco control progress. Thailand and Vietnam, I think, the two countries that Indonesia can look up for tobacco control. Yeah.
Okay, and so maybe one step further. So if you would have been asked to add one chapter, you would have had the time and everything would be in place to add one more chapter on this international perspective. So your focus in the thesis is on impact and implications and implementation of policy regarding tobacco use, and further on you looked at other factors influencing the tobacco use. So if you would have to write another chapter where you really put it in an international perspective, what would that chapter look like? And maybe can you think about what type of data you would like to have for this?
Okay. Do I need to add more chapters? No, okay.
I think
yeah. I think yeah, it is interesting, especially like I can imagine that we need to compare all the tobacco control policy progress in Southeast Asia region, and then which country is the leading in the progress and in the smoking prevalence, maybe in the reduction of smoking prevalence, or in the and which one is better in the implementation, so we can see which strategy is more promising from which country? I think that.
And sorry, what are the typical data that you would use for this?
The same with my thesis. First, the compilation of tobacco control policies from national, local level, and many.
So are you proposing to repeat your thesis, but then for 6 times to have like a set of countries to be able to compare?
It is. It is a huge work actually, but it is. It is a huge work, but it is quite interesting to see who is the leading in the tobacco control in Southeast Asia region.
Okay, so maybe you could discuss these topics or your thesis in an international forum where you have like discussions about your findings and where you would be able to compare it with findings in other countries rather than repeating all these studies. It doesn't need to be a very long chapter, what I'm asking, I think.
Okay.
Maybe a last somewhat trivial question.
But I'm a little bit in doubt to give you the floor further. Otherwise, I think we have a time problem. So
okay, thanks.
I like to thank you, Dr. Ten Asbroek. And the opposition will be continued by Professor Stronks. Professor Stronks is a professor in social medicine at the University of Amsterdam. Professor Stronks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rector. By virtue of my right and with permission of the Rector, I would like to discuss the content of the thesis with you, dear candidate. But first, also from my side, of course, congratulations with your thesis. I've enjoyed reading it, and I was particularly impressed by the fact that you have used so many different types of research, like the policy document analysis, but also quasi-experimental study and a survey. So congratulations for that. I would like to discuss first the role of the tobacco production in Indonesia. And I was very happy to hear you mention that in the previous discussion with the previous opponent, because I missed a little bit of information and also reflection on that in your thesis. In chapter 3, you study the determinants of that have contributed to the decline in smoking prevalence. And then in chapter 4, you say, well, that's not a huge decline, and that's due to the fact that there is a weak implementation of these anti-smoking policies, smoke-free policies, and a poor compliance. Professor Nagelhout also referred to that. And from this, your advice is to do a better job, Indonesian government, in the implementation of the smoke-free policies. And my question is, if you make this recommendation, should you then not take into account the role of the tobacco production industry? And I was surprised to see that there's no reference to that in for example, the chapter where you summarize the policy recommendations. But the influence of this industry must be very, very large. So my question is it indeed large, the impact? And how do you see that role of the industry in the implementation of this kind of policies?
Okay, yeah. The highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question and concern about tobacco production in Indonesia. Usually the impact is not as large as at the national level. For example, maybe I can tell you a story about how tobacco control policy at national level and the tobacco industry influence. For example, at national level, when the government want to adopt a really good tobacco control policies, there is a controversy where one of the section just disappeared due to how strong tobacco industry in Indonesia is. So, but in the national level, they usually only raise an issue about tobacco farmers, not about big issue that usually they use at the national level. So if I don't think tobacco farmers issue at the local level is a sexy issue for them. Because usually tobacco leaves, the tobacco industry, they put a lower price to buy the tobacco industry, tobacco leaves from farmers, and it is something that the stakeholders and other people they never see, and we can argue what we often can argue what tobacco industry offer to cancel usually local policy, with another argument that people never see. I think I can say that it is more large, the lobby of tobacco industry at national level than at the local level.
But also at the local level, both levels, I can imagine it's a very important factor in terms of source of income. So if you have to make choices as a government between policy, smoke-free policies, implementation, and economy, then it might be that they decide in favor of the economy and so support the industry. Which is not a very visible mechanism probably, but it's very likely to be there. It
is a pity that Indonesia, the prices of cigarette is the lowest among Southeast Asia regions, but the government, they increase the excise tax of cigarette products, tobacco products, but the prices is still low. But I think, in my opinion, if the industry often raise issue of economics, and then why the government, maybe the government will lose many revenue or income from tobacco industry. So why don't the stakeholders increase the price of cigarettes, for example, if they give issue of economy to counter tobacco control policy?
Well, it's maybe a good question for a next PhD candidate to study the documents, also the internal documents of the tobacco industry, to see how their influence, what the influence has been in the past. Thank you for your reflections. What I would like to address also is the smoking prevalence among girls, among female population. And that prevalence is extremely low. It's only 3% now. So I expected you to give some recommendations as to keep this percentage as low as it now is. This is wonderful news, actually, that it's that low. So how to prevent an increase in the smoking prevalence in this female population? That would be a very urgent topic, I think. So I would like to ask you the question, what would you advise the Indonesian government as to how to keep this prevalence as low as it is now?
Okay, maybe I can thank to the cultural norms in Indonesia that, female smoking, especially female smoking is lower, because here in Indonesia, and also I think in many Asian countries, that smoking is related to masculine behavior, and usually girls who do masculine behavior, it is wrong in the society. It is wrong in the society, and it is one of the advantages of the cultural norm to protect, especially to protect adolescent girls from smoking. And based on my thesis, I can advise the government need to focus on girls usually from richer family, because girls from richer family, from wealthier family, they are more vulnerable to smoke. It is like cultural development or movement. Maybe smoking now is captured as something cool among girls. So we need to focus on that if we want to have a good tobacco smoking prevention among girls. I think that we need to focus on girls who's wealthier.
Yeah, but because the girls from wealthier families are probably more like men already, and probably the lower educated and lower income groups will follow in the long term, which was also the case in countries as the Netherlands or Denmark, for example.
Yeah.
So what can we learn from the other countries?
I think
This
it's
is
a
a
very
big
short
question.
answer. Yeah.
Big question, so it's difficult to give a short answer, I think.
Okay, then I think we have to finish now. But
thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Professor Strongs. Then, dear candidates, the discussion is closed now, and I request you to read the second part of the formula.
Second part of the formula. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Having thus concluded the defense of my thesis to the best of my ability, and pending the decision of the doctorate committee, I should like to express my sincere thanks to my highly esteemed supervisors in particular, as well as to those who have so courteously brought forward their criticisms, and to all who have honored the ceremony with their presence.
Thank you. The committee retires for deliberations, and we will come back.
give the floor to the rector.
Thank you. Esteemed candidates, after due consideration of the thesis you have submitted, we have decided to grant you the doctoral degree. Your supervisor, Professor Kunz, also on behalf of Dr. N, is authorized to confer this dignity upon you in a customary fashion. Professor Kunz, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. I most willingly accept the task assigned to me by the Rector Magnificus of the University. By virtue of the power conferred upon us by law, and in accordance with the decision of the Rector and the Doctorate Board of the University of Amsterdam, I hereby confer upon you, Wahyu Septiono, the degree of Doctor, and grant you all the rights pertaining hereto by law or custom. In evidence hereof, you will be presented in due time with the degree certificate signed by the rector and the supervisors and confirmed with the crown seal of the university. Having thus fulfilled the task assigned to me, I have the honor of being the first to address you as a doctor and to congratulate you with the dignity conferred on you. So, dear Wahyu, Dr. Septiono, congratulations. You accomplished a long journey. It started 6 years ago when you sent me an email, and not only me, but also to, for example, Professor van der Putten, in which he informed you that you had a grant for a PhD and you searched for a place to study. Unfortunately, by the time I did have some time to read your mail, and I was very much interested in what you have written. So we started to talk, and we noted that we had a common interest in smoking. As for me, tobacco is an international problem, and I'm concerned with, like many colleagues, that if we solve the problem in Europe, the problem will simply shift to other countries around the world. And as for you, there are two things I think that aroused your interest in tobacco from the start. At the most general level, the fact that Indonesia did not ratify the framework of tobacco control, and perhaps at the most detailed level, that video of this young child, 2 years old, which was already addicted to smoking. And everything between the highest and most detailed level interests you, be it local tobacco control or be it family determinants of smoking, it all interests you. And fortunately, you will be able to cover all these topics in your thesis. The trajectory that had led to your thesis, you called it demanding, breathtaking, astonishing. And why? I think first of all, because doing a PhD implied for you to go to the Netherlands. You had to find a place in this country and get used to the strange habits and the cold weather. And you could see your family only on mobile phone, including your nephews and nieces, which you call the cutest little humans. But fortunately, you could make many friends, you had good colleagues, and you often find a place in the Indonesian community in the Netherlands. And I think Holland offered you the opportunities to take many beautiful pictures, as photography is one of your hobbies. And I'm very pleased that you closed your thesis with the words, "Thank you, Holland." But if it's not Holland that was so demanding, what then? What made the PhD trajectory so demanding to you? And I think the problem is your supervisors. We gave you an intensive supervision. As you said in your thesis, we have been pushing you hard, and we have not hesitated to mention your weaknesses, such as your English writing skills, which had to be developed. And I know we were demanding, but I hope that we haven't pushed you too hard. And I think that in the end, you have learned a lot. And this is testified by the thesis, to which, for example, you wrote all by itself a very well developed introduction and discussion. And this discussion ends where your interest started, with the fact that Indonesia still has not ratified the FCTC. I very much liked our regular meetings. It was very pleasant for me, but also for Meerte and Navi, to be working with you. You are smart, you are willing to learn, and you do everything in talk with a sense of humor that I very much like. And moreover, you are creative, for example, in the way in which you visualize your results, like in the introductory talk to this meeting. And it was pleasant even more so in the later stages of the project, when you had learned a lot and we could focus more and more on the contents. And I felt that you really had become an expert in tobacco control in Indonesia. And I very much wish that all this expertise and this new title, you will use it to further stimulate a smoke-free Indonesia. And hereby I would like to give the word to the second promoter.
And of course, Wahyu, continuing your scientific work, you will also help translating all the scientific results from your work into policy and actions for tobacco control implementation in Indonesia. For us, a PhD training is a journey, as you say. It's a way to get independency. And I have personally witnessed your independency has grown over the last 6 years. I remember the first time I met you in a coffee shop in Amsterdam, when I visited Amsterdam after I talked with Anton. And since then, I've seen you grow and grow and grow during the last 6 years. So you might have a question to ask yourself, what would the future hold for you? And from your Facebook page, we are not friends on Facebook for sure, but I look into your Facebook page, I know that you idolize the Blue Ranger. You even has a photo of Blue Ranger with yourself. It is a fictional character in the Power Ranger universe. The Blue Ranger is known as the smart one, the brain of all the Rangers, and he is the one who creates tools to solve problems. For all generations like your opponents and like your supervisor, he is the MacGyver of our time on the televisions. And I have seen that you have always been very creative, enthusiastic, and always driven to learn and use many different methods in your thesis. So, Dr. Septiono, I think you are indeed a Blue Ranger. I have no doubt that you will be the Blue Ranger for the tobacco control in Indonesia in the future. If I may say a few words in Indonesian to address Dr. Septiono and the family. Perjuangan untuk mencapai gelar doktoral di Universitas Amsterdam sangat menantang. Dan Dr. Septiono sudah berhasil menyelesaikan tahapan hidup ini dengan sempurna, bekas kerja keras, keteguhan, serta dukungan dan cinta dari keluarga dan teman-teman. Saya turut mengucapkan selamat kepada orang tua dan keluarga besar Dek Wahyu yang mungkin menyaksikan lewat YouTube. Terima kasih sudah memberikan kepercayaan kepada kami dan Universitas Amsterdam untuk membimbing Dek Wahyu dalam perjuangan ini. Finally, I hope our path will cross in the future, and I very much welcome future collaboration with you, Dr. Wahyu Septiono. Congratulations, selamat.
So, Blue Ranger, Dr. Septiono, regard the obtained dignity as an honor and a privilege, and never forget the attendant responsibilities which you now bear towards science and society.
Thank you. It is a very pleasant duty, most learned scholar, to congratulate you, also on behalf of the doctorate board of the University of Amsterdam, on this newly acquired honor. And hereby, I declare this ceremony closed. And Dr. Septiono, my congratulations. Have a nice day, and I hope you can use your title in the future for a very healthy and safe in a safe way. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Now I will give the floor to the different opponents. After that, we give an applause to you. And I will first give the floor to Professor van den Putten to say some words to you, and then we will go further to the different opponents. But we will start with Professor van den Putten.
Well, Dr. Septiono, how does it feel to be called doctor? Many congratulations.
Weird.
Yeah, well, many congratulations. I think it's very well deserved. I just heard that your supervisors, they push you hard and they worked on your language skills. Well, I must say this is one of the best written theses I've read in a long time. So I think that's all your achievement. It was really a pleasure to read. It was very easy to read, and I think it was excellent English. So I think no problem there anymore. And it was also very interesting and very diverse. So I would say next time, in case you would like to write a second PhD, please mail me again, and I will try to be quicker than Dr. Kunst. And maybe we can also meet in real life then. Many congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor van den Putten. The next is Professor Nagelhout.
Dear Dr. Septiono, congratulations. I'll keep it short because we don't know each other really well, but I really enjoyed reading your thesis, and I think you've done an excellent job with your defense. So enjoy.
Thanks. Dr. de Boer.
Dear Wahyu, Dr. Septiono, also my congratulations, of course. It was really nice to read your thesis, as I said earlier. Excellent work. I agree that this was one of the best written theses I've actually read in quite a while. So great work there. Also on your defense, sorry for the difficult question on explanatory variables. Maybe we have an opportunity to talk about that once. Yeah. But anyways, I hope you really enjoy the rest of your day. It's a little bit later in Indonesia, I guess, than in our time. But you might still have a couple of hours to celebrate. So I wish you well, a lot of happiness with that.
Thank you. Then Dr. Ten Asbroek.
Dr. Septiono, many congratulations. I really enjoyed your thesis and also the defense, and I hope if our paths cross, then that we discuss a bit longer about all the ins and outs of international perspectives on local context. Thanks a lot and good luck.
Thank you. And then Professor Strongs.
Wahyu, congratulations, very well done. Do you remember what your first words were when we met at the AMC?
Yes,
you said
I still remember. Yeah.
You said to me, "You are so tall, much taller than I expected you to be."
Yeah.
So that we started laughing. That was our first meeting, and I think, well, your promoters have now said you have grown a lot over the past 6 years. So you are tall now as well. So congratulations, and I really hope that you will contribute to better Indonesia in terms of smoke-free Indonesia in the future. Very well done.
Thank you. Then perhaps the promoters or the co-promoter will say anything. Professor Kunst, do you like to say anything again?
I will meet him afterwards, then I will say again, and I speak in the laudatio, so I will not do it now, but perhaps the co-promoter may want to say something.
Okay, very good. Then the co-promoter.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Wahyu, congratulations. Very well done. I'm very proud of you. And also of the way you've done this whole PhD trajectory with so much positivity and kindness, even though we did push you hard sometimes, but you always
okay.
Optimistic and very positive. So it was a pleasure to work with you. And yeah, I hope our paths will cross, and we will keep in touch.
Okay, Professor Angie, do you like to say anything again, or is it okay for you? Yes.
Yes, well, maybe a secret that I would like to reveal after this defense. I have actually met Wahyu in person only once when I went to Amsterdam. Being so far away, I did not unfortunately have a lot of opportunity to meet in person. So I very much look forward to future exchanges also, Wahyu.
Okay, then dear candidate, do you like to say anything to all the persons here in a virtual way?
Yeah, thank you for taking part in my PhD journey. It is a pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you for your concern and your questions. It also gives me a lot of different sides of what maybe the tobacco control Indonesia need to do. Thank you for your questions and your comments. Okay,
thank you. Then I will congratulate, of course, the promoters and the co-promoter for the supervising activities you did, and also, of course, with your results. And I will say a good day, a fine day, good evening, and we will see you again.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Wahyu, we stay behind for a little bit longer? Okay.